right, for the next panel, which is going to be about cybersecurity threats and defense, we have a panel that will focus on the discussion that is navigating cybersecurity landscape for SMEs itself. So the moderator, can I please invite Mr. Michael Liu, Chairman of Cyber Risk Subcommittee, Singapore FinTech Association. Let's give him a round of applause. You might have to dance your way up. So Michael Liu is a leading tech expert with over 20 years of consulting experience in technology and cyber risk management, digital forensic investigation. He's also recognized by Cybersecurity Agency of Singapore in 2022 and is a past president for High Technology Crime Investigation Association and has been providing expert testimonials in both Singapore and Malaysia. Can I just have a show of hands? Can you guys hear me? I want to make sure the panel speakers get their due introduction. Right, so next, can I please invite Mr. Anthony Lim from Cybersecurity, Governance and FinTech, Singapore University of Social Sciences? Yes. So Anthony is a pioneer of cybersecurity and governance in Singapore and Asia Pacific region with over 25 years of professional experience as a business leader, consultant, advocate, instructor and auditor. He's also an adjunct instructor for academic and professional institution, and also at NATO at Washington, D.C. and Stanford University. Next up, I have Mr. Thomas Kang, Chief Information Security Officer of Raka Digital. So Thomas is the Chief Information Security Officer, the emerging digital assets custodian for institutions in Asia, backed by SBC 10X, and powered by Fireblocks. He's got over 10 years of experience providing thought, leadership, risk, advisory and management consultancy on cybersecurity, data privacy and business resilience. Next up, we have Dr. Brian Tan, the Chief Scientist at Caro. As Caro's Chief Scientist, Brian leads technological innovations that includes wide deployment of data analytics and statistics. In 2021, Financial Times named Caro the fastest growing company in Asia Pacific with revenues of over 700 million annually in 2021. That deserves another big round of applause, guys. Yeah. So Brian's also established academic, obtaining his PhD from University of Cambridge. He's taught and spoken at renowned academic institutions all over the globe. We're very happy to have you. Last but not least, I have Mr. Daniel Chan, Director of Professional Services, Data Protection Officer at Ascent Solutions. He's the Director of Professional Services, leading the Professional Services Department, which encompasses project management team, field services, engineering, data analytics, and customer support. So without further ado, Michael, I'll let you take away the moderating.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. I think as the moderator, one of the biggest fear to have a session after lunch is everyone will fall asleep. But thanks to the band, which beautiful music, I think that's not an issue. So, well, without further ado, with a bit of quiet, let's get our show on the road. So yeah, as per the introduction, I think first of all, do we have the barcode for the pool? Yeah. So we're going to run the pool as well, so at this point, you maybe can scan this and we have a question. So while we go through, perhaps you can answer it or, to just run the poll. But we will come back to it at the end as usual, in terms of the answers, which is the highest ranking, right? Can everyone get it? Yeah? Okay. So the first thing I want to talk about, we're all here to know about the cybersecurity threat and defenses, right? So the first thing we want to get into is threats, and of course our audience here are mostly SMB, small, medium business, so it always starts with a mindset. So when you're a small business, naturally your mindset is, why will I be a target, right? Because I may not be as attractive as some of the big corporations, the big banks, and those with a lot to lose, right? So why will I be a target, when I'm small? So do I even need to worry about it, right? So that's the first mindset, right? But I'm here to share with you that it is something that a small, medium business need to worry about, because in reality, being a small, medium business, you could be what you deem as a low-lying fruit. So for example, if I want to rob a mansion, so imagine there's a really big mansion and lots of money in it, lots of wealth, right? So in front of the mansion, there'll be armed guards, and even if you get to the front door, there'll be the most sophisticated locks, right? So, but, having said that, as you know, you could go through the service entrance as a pizza delivery guy, right? So to a certain extent, the biggest threat there is probably a kitchen helper smoking on a smoking break. So there are always what you call your low-lying fruit or back doors in any situation. So similarly, the cyber criminals understand that as well. While you are a small medium business, but a lot of times you do not want small customers only. So of course you are gearing up to serve, let's say, the bigger clients like banks, financial institution, right? So obviously, if the real target is, let's say, the MAS regulated entities, so cyber criminals will then say that, so maybe the weakest link here is to go through the back door, to go through the service entrance, so to speak, right? Which is the SMB, because the SMB may not have, or in fact, they will not have the level of security as the big banks, but there is a way that provide a back door to it as well. So that's just to sort of set the mindset. But before I go further to get the panelists to start talking, there's another mindset I want to change. Why would a SMB want to increase their security, right? What is the upside? So we know the downside, that you are a target whether you like it or not. But the upside is if you have very strong cybersecurity, then you can get very big clients as well. So it's a great upside for the business, right? Because nowadays, even large business, they do evaluate their outsourced providers as well. So they will see if you have a very robust cybersecurity system, so chances of you winning that job, the big job, is higher as well. So there is a very significant upside to consider. Okay, so the first question, just give me a minute. I would like to direct it to Daniel. So how does a cybersecurity landscape in terms of the number of cybersecurity incidents will look like for a small, medium business?
Okay, thanks, Michael. Just to get a sense, before I answer the questions, how many of you here are owners of SMBs? Just a show of hands. Okay, we have at least some. Wow, thanks, cool. I think when the panel met together and we were discussing, we noticed that there's a shift in terms of where the hackers or the perpetrators are moving towards to, and that is to go for the low-hanging fruits. And actually that's SMBs. And more interestingly, when we look at the food chain, large corporations, sometimes they subcontract work to SMBs, and hence the low-hanging fruits. But just to give some stats before you all think I'm fubbing or I'm faking the stats. So according to Verizon's DBIR, for the past 10 years, since 2013 to 2022, in terms of malware, the numbers, in terms of percentage of incidences related to SMBs has risen from 20% to 65%. Ransomware-wise, it was from 1% to 10%. In terms of phishing attacks, which is what I think most of us here are subject to, when you get a funny kind of email that seems to be like, oh, it's from my boss, but actually it's not from your boss. This kind of incidence has risen from 15% to 42%. So it's more than 3 times, or rather close to 3 times. I think in terms of the landscape, it's becoming more prevalent. It is becoming more sophisticated. Yep. So I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Daniel. Anthony, would you like to add on to this? Of course, we can talk about the landscape for small, medium business, but you will also maybe share with us what's the difference with the larger organization. So what's the same and what's different when it comes to this sort of threat?
Well, actually, largely, unless it's a specific targeted, sophisticated advanced attack, generally most attacks are opportunistic. So it doesn't really matter whether you're an SMB or large corporation or government organization. The typical types of attacks are the same, whether it's malware or phishing or DDoS attack or any, because see, hackers don't have a lot of time. So you're whether a big organization or small organization, you might have cybersecurity defenses and they might get caught. So it's like a thief. They don't have a lot of time, so they just whack wherever they can. So therefore, and sometimes when they're acting, unless you're targeted attack, they don't know whether you're an SMB or a big corporation. They'll attack you first and see what they can get, see what data they can get, or see where your network leads. So typically, it's generally safe to say that you don't really differentiate between the type of attack to a big organization or the type of attack to a smaller organization.
That's a very good point. Does any other panelists would like to chip in? Brian?
Yes, I think Anthony is totally right. I think hackers are agnostic to who they target. Basically they will use all their resources to target maybe a particular IP, right, and see what's there. They are not sure whether the IP belongs to a small corporate or a big corporate. They're just going to use all their resources. It's like a thief, right? I use all my tools at the safe. I don't know who this safe belongs to, but you're going to go at it anyway. So I think that's very true. That's very true. So which is why SMBs tend to also bear the brunt of most security breaches, because they're going to come at you with all they have, and you probably have less defense compared to big corporates. So yeah.
So is it safe to say that maybe the baseline defense for SMB may not be sufficient in many cases? Thomas, do you have any view on that?
I think from the risk management perspective, right, the key thing for SMB to understand is there's always holes. Holes are everywhere. You can't fix all the issues. There's no point to fix all the issues. Even us, right, we can't fix every issue. We have to figure out what's the biggest issue for you. You need to find your crown jewel. What's the most valuable assets in your company, and try to figure out your defense strategy to protect your crown jewels. That will help a lot. Of course, there will be a lot of things that we can talk, cost baseline, do the basic stuff, but you need to put a lot more emphasis on how to protect your assets. For example, you're a data analytics company, then obviously data is your crown jewel, and you should put more effort into it. Prioritize it. That's your biggest risk. Of course, others should be a priority as well, but that one will be definitely the one. Or maybe your financial service. Your system needs to be in almost 99.99% availability, right? Then your system resilience, your availability will be a control. You need to make sure that you can satisfy your SLA. That one is your biggest risk. So you have to figure out your biggest risk. Focus on biggest risk, and you will save a lot from there.
I want to add to that, if you don't mind.
Yes, please.
Not only that, you see, prioritize what is important and what are your risks. Get your basic cybersecurity practices in order. Passwords, 2FA, encryption, network segmentation, patches, and all that. Why? Because, like I said, hackers don't have time. Hackers are opportunistic. So if a hacker is attacking you halfway and find that you have this, you have that, he's not going to bother. He's going to attack somebody else. So we have this joke that in cybersecurity that if you and like me and Thomas are walking in the jungle and the lion comes after us, we need to run. I don't need to run faster than lion. I just run faster than Thomas. So the same thing. A hacker comes in, he finds it too hard to attack you. You have 14-character password, you have network segmentation, you have 2FA. He's not going to bother. He's going to attack somebody else.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. I think so basically there's two types of attack. The opportunistic, which is probably the bulk of it. But of course, there's also the targeted attack, which means you are targeted for a specific reason, or certain organizations are targeted. So that's something that I think we need to also pay attention to, because it's very real. So maybe on that note, Thomas, I think you do have some experience, a war story to share, right? Would you like to do that?
Yeah. I think I came across a security incident. As a CISO, right, we always join the events and talk about security incidents because everyone interested in security incident. They want to know all the nasty stuff, right, and what happened in the other companies and stuff. So my story is, it's actually very common. We have a default engineer. So default engineer basically a part of a tech team who manages all the infrastructure and also the source code of the company. Normally, the tech team will not use emails. They hate emails. They will never lucky emails. But they're very interested to participate into some chat groups talking about tech stuff. So in the Telegram, the DevOps engineer joined the Telegram and start to share about his technical ideas about how to build a good infrastructure and architecture using a lot of CI/CD stuff. He shared his email address. And he started to receive phishing email. He didn't know that it was a phishing email. He submitted his username, password, and also 2FA. So within the 30 seconds of the 2FA time frame, right, his GitHub account got hacked. And the hacker could access to the source code. It was nasty. So at that point of time, how could he figure it out? He received an email, password change email from GitHub saying that, oh, your password has been changed. If you feel something wrong, reach out to GitHub and your security team or whatever. So I received the notification. I received the report from that DevOps guy. What we did, just to make sure that firstly, make sure you have logs. Before you do anything, make sure you have logs. And then turn off the account. Totally delete the account to make sure that that hacker cannot access to our source code anymore. And then we tell everyone in the tech team or who has the access to the GitHub, rotate their access keys, rotate everything. And then we do our forensic to see what's the impact of what's the or hackers can access to our system or whatever. Eventually, touch wood, we realized that the hacker didn't download or access to other critical source code. So the fortunate thing is the DevOps is a new joiner. So he don't really have a lot of access to our system, so good luck, very good luck. And I think the lesson that we can learn from here is, whenever we talk about security incident, right, most of the people will say, okay, it will be like hacking an exchange system, hacking a bank or whatever, hacking Uber. So actually, hacking could be like Anthony mentioned, it could be opportunistic. This is randomly target some engineers in a Telegram group, and that's it. And then we got hacked. So sometimes it's not about whether or not you have done a lot, whether or not you have good security team or not. Sometimes hackers could be opportunistic. And what we really need to do, right, like I mentioned, first of all, find your biggest risk. Make sure everyone knows the responsibility, especially new joiners. I think this is very good kind of strategy for SME, especially for SME. You can't prioritize everything. But if you prioritize your new joiners, I think you can solve a lot of problems. Because their awareness to security will be very weak when they join the company. If you emphasize that cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility, from day one, they will know that, okay, we have to be careful because I'm handling the source code for a company, I may get fired. Then, yeah, they will put a lot of more effort to protect the source code and all his accounts. Find your biggest risk, do the basic like Mike mentioned, set up the baseline for your company. You don't need to have a very high standard like a bank. No. Basic stuff like Anthony mentioned, 2FA, password, rotate your password in 90 days, and that kind of thing. You have to do it. This is a baseline for every single company. And maybe you can consider buying the cyber insurance. Like if there's something that you cannot do or you cannot predict what will happen in the future, buy the insurance to like transfer your risk to the company, and yeah, they will cover your loss from there. So there's about a lot of strategy from there, but the key thing, that's the first strategy I mentioned. Cybersecurity, everyone's responsibility.
Okay, thanks, Thomas. I think this is a good lead-in as well. We talk about the threats, how it's a very real threat, and of course, Thomas has also touched a bit on the defenses, what you can do, And I'd like to add on a bit on the cyber hygiene. So it is true, if you have a new employee or someone just joined your firm, it's very important to set what is the firm's position, your hygiene level. So if the firm has very strong cyber hygiene, then naturally all your staff and colleagues and even your stakeholders will also adhere to it. But if the firm is very lax in terms of how they manage passwords and all those, then obviously everyone will also take a more relaxed approach to it, or less hygiene, so to speak. But what I want to do now is to also drill down a bit more on our defenses, right? So maybe Daniel, would you like to share a bit on some of the best practices or what defenses that organization can adapt?
Actually, before I want to ask that, I want to get a little bit of participation from the audience. I can see from the survey results that 27% shares on 2 points. No dedicated, I think, IT personnel. Would that be the answer? Then the other one is weak data protection. Policies. Okay, so I think maybe I want to pose a question to the audience before I share what I think are best practices for SMBs or SMEs. Can I have a show of hands, right? How many of you feel that, how many of you concur with point number 1, no dedicated IT personnel? I think some of you struggle, right? Okay, so you all just wish there was this magical AI software tool that I connect, plug and play, I know what's my threat level, I can block everything. Yeah, I see one of my friends nodding his head, maybe I can do a plugin for his software, but maybe you can do that later. But I think it all starts from leadership. I know I'm not giving a very cyber security technical answer, but from SME standpoint, most of the time is you look to, if you're the boss, then it is your onus to decide what are the valuable things that you want to protect. If you recognize that you have certain data, confidential data, or very sensitive data that you need to protect, if you know how to lock your cabinets in your office, the same thing happens in the digital realm. Would you agree? Yeah, I think that's what Thomas has been trying to say all along. Identify what is really important. Then from there, you will know, then you will ask yourself the next question, how do I protect it? So in the physical realm, what do? I think of abloy locks. Those from the Singapore Armed Forces, we all hear abloy locks all the time. But in the digital realm, what would be the equivalent of an abloy lock? Do we want to use biometric locks? Yada, yada. Okay, I know I'm rambling already, so I thought of an acronym. I think for most business owners here, we're short of attention. We just want a very easy way of remembering what are the best practices. So I thought of this word, safe back. SAFE, you make sure that you're very safe and someone has your back, safe back. So number 1 is having a security policy in place. Like what Anthony was mentioning about having strong passwords. So S is security policy in place, A is a strong password set and multi-factor authentication. F, firewall, antivirus software. E, educate your employees about cybersecurity. Now B, backup data regularly. If you all don't know what to look at, yes, I'm not supposed to do a plugin for someone, but freeware. If business owners want freeware, you can look at Duplicati, DUPLICATE. The next one is A, activate monitoring for suspicious activity. Okay, if you all don't know who to look for Mr. Ku Chia Ching. He will be able to advise you. C, create a plan in case of a security breach. Okay, this one is very important. You have to plan for the worst case scenario. If something happens, you need to execute a plan. What are you going to do? Last one is K, keep your softwares updated, up to date. Yeah, that's all.
Thanks, Daniel. Since we touched into the polls answer, I want to add on to it. Actually, it's quite interesting that the top 2 is, in fact, the first one is no dedicated information security team, and the second one is data protection. So I think this is very important because information security and IT is very different, right? So you could have an IT team, which most business has, to help you to set up your computers and to do basic troubleshooting support. But information security here is a skill set, as a specialist, a specialization, right? Someone who really understands information security and how to protect. So in fact, we can collapse it with data protection as well. So again, a lot of times for small businesses, the IT guys will manage our data. But in fact, again, they're not the right people to manage your information security or your data because they are IT specialists. I mean, what they do is really your hardware, software, and just getting things working. You need people who are trained, who understand information security and data privacy to protect your data, and not necessarily just someone who knows IT. So, but on that note, I would like to get Brian. Brian, I know you live and breathe data, right? So when it comes to data protection, and information security, what's the best way to protect data?
Okay, so for data itself, so in Karo itself, we actually have processed different type of data. So some data will be things like computer vision. So we use images of cars, front, back, etc. Try to do some identification of which part is damaged. So I got a whole series of images. So those are not so valuable because, even what are they going to do with these images, right? Of course, apart from that itself, we got more data that are more confidential. So these are data that translate to transaction that happened. So because then there will be a pricing of cars, there will be things like particulars of customers, there will be things like financial status of customer if they take loans, etc. So all of these become very, very important for us in the case of data security to make sure that for PDPA reason, for data privacy reason itself, we have to be very clear that these are things that we need to protect, put under multiple layers of security. In fact, in terms of access, not all my staff are entitled to access the more private confidential data. So I give access based on seniority, also based on a need-to-know basis. So only if you need to deal with the pricing of the car, then you get access to pricing data. But all the other data scientists will not be able to access. Or even for transaction, you have to go beyond the requirement of a data scientist. Because data scientists only deal with anonymized data. So deal with transaction of customer particulars. They have to make it very clear that only the accounting team or the auditing team will actually get access to them because they need to process the transaction and so on and so forth. So I think that is where we come from, a case whereby we keep data very private. Of course, then, I think what's interesting is that sometimes there are some data that are more avant-garde. Compared to like normal, address, names, that kind of stuff, will be things like even driving behavior. So we also do some telemetry solutions. So look at people driving behavior. This is the kind of project that we do with insurance company to decide, who deserve a premium discount based on their safe driving patterns in the past, right? So all of this is what we call avant-garde data. So under the Privacy Data Protection Act itself, driving patterns is never where you stop, where you brake is never a case where you need to protect. But then for our own company itself, because this affects customer, in terms of the premium they pay, it affects customer welfare, etc. So we also keep this also tightly protected as well. So we protect not only names, account number, transaction amount, but also things like when you drive, when you brake, kind of stuff. And when you start driving, when you have a driving license, etc. So all of these are all data that need to be protected. So they all exist. I think the problem is that they exist in different containers or data lake or data warehouses because of the fact that they're very diverse, right? Sources of data where you collect them, as well as where you process them. So it's very important when we have a company policy on data security itself. The CISO is actually very important. They need to be able to make sure that everything is governed tightly. So leadership, it's also important. Leadership as in stakeholder buy-in from both the CEO, etc., stakeholders, shareholders. You must believe that data security is important. They must be willing to invest in it. Yeah, because of course it makes things slower. Transaction is not happening in 10 seconds, probably take 1 hour to happen. But it needs to be the case in order to make sure that, data security is important.
Thanks, Brian. That's very insightful. So we have probably one last question for the panelists, and then we're open to the floor, for question. So as they say, when it comes to cyber security threats, or incident, it's not a matter of if, but when, So all organizations, as mentioned by Anthony, regardless of size, at some point you will have to deal with a data breach or incident. So Anthony, I'd like you to share with everyone, when there is an incident or breach, so what is the more effective PR communication? What can you do, to minimize the impact of what has already happened?
Well, to be honest with you, I don't want to focus too much on the PR aspect because big companies, listed companies, then they get the lawyers and the and the media. They want to have a politically nice message to appease. Then internally, they don't take care. What is important is for many years, many organizations, big and small, the cyber security incident response management system is broken. Then when a breach happens, people run around chicken without head, pointing finger at each other. Then it's too late. Then when everything happy, 3 months later, so there's a break between incident response, risk management, and business continuity and disaster recovery. We need to tie all that together. So yes, it's important the PR message to the public and all that, but that is easy. That's the easy part because everything is nothing, mosi, 没有事, We are working on this so that one they can. But internally, how do you get your act together? How do you get your cybersecurity? Are your people trained to escalate? Are your people empowered to escalate? A few years ago, the biggest data breach in Singapore history, 1.5 billion records. The Committee of Inquiry report showed that the incident response system was broken. Officers didn't know what to do. They dare not report. They say, they try to cover it up, not because they were bad, but because they thought they could solve it at their level. So we should empower and train our staff to know when and how and who to record. I have audited big listed companies, billion-dollar listed companies, their business continuity plan. The guy resigned 2 years ago, his name is still on the list. Do you update? This is what we need to get the incident response and business continuity process act together. Then we worry about the others.
Okay, thanks, Anthony. It sounds like the transparency and also getting your house in order is the key here. Well, given the time we have, let's open to the floor. Is there any question that you would like to ask the panelists? That's our cue. The session is ending soon. Any questions? I think we're okay, yeah? All right, so thank you, everyone. A special thanks to all the panelists.
Let's give a round of applause to our distinguished panel speakers. Yes,